Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaivam Narottamam Devam Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye. Hare Krishna. Something happening with the mic. Hey Padma. Alright, this morning we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Continuing to hear, second canto. I'm going to throw this off. Alright, we're hearing Canto 2, Chapter 9, Text 23. Pratyadishtam maya tatra Tvayi karma vimohite Tapome hidayam sakshat Atmaham tapaso nagha Pratyadishtam maya tatra Tvayi karma vimohite Tapome hidayam sakshat Atmaham tapaso nagha Pratyadishtam maya tatra Tvayi karma vimohite Tapome hidayam sakshat Atmaham tapaso nagha. Please repeat. Pratyadishtam, ordered. Maya, by me. Tatra, because of. Tvayi, unto you. Karma, duty. Vimohite, being perplexed. Tapaha, penance. Me, me. Hridayam, heart. Sakshat, directly. Atma, life and soul. Aham, myself. Tapasaha, of one who is engaged in penance. Anagha, O sinless one. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. O sinless Brahma, you may know from me that it was I who first ordered you to undergo penance when you were perplexed in your duty. Such penance is my heart and soul, and therefore penance and I are non-different. Please repeat. O sinless Brahma, you may know from me that it was I who first ordered you to undergo penance when you were perplexed in your duty. Such penance is my heart and soul, and therefore penance and I are non-different. Purport. The penance by which one can see the personality of Godhead face to face is to be understood as devotional service to the Lord and nothing else, because only by discharging devotional service in transcendental love can one approach the Lord. Such penance is the internal potency of the Lord and is non-different from Him. Such acts of internal potency are exhibited by non-attachment for material enjoyment. The living entities are engaged in the conditions of material bondage because of their propensity for overlordship. But by engagement in the devotional service of the Lord, one becomes detached from this enjoying spirit. The devotees automatically become detached from worldly enjoyment, and this detachment is the result of perfect knowledge. Therefore, the penance of devotional service includes knowledge and detachment, and that is the manifestation of the transcendental potency. One cannot enjoy material, illusory prosperity if he desires to return home, back to Godhead. One who has no information of the transcendental bliss in the association of the Lord foolishly desires to enjoy this temporary material happiness. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said that if one sincerely wants to see the Lord and at the same time wants to enjoy this material world, he is considered to be a fool only. One who wants to remain here in the material world for material enjoyment has no business entering into the eternal kingdom of God. The Lord favors such a foolish devotee by snatching all that he may possess in the material world. If such a foolish devotee of the Lord tries to recoup his position, then the merciful Lord again snatches away all that he may have possessed. By such repeated failures in material prosperity, he becomes very unpopular with his family members and friends. In the material world, the family members and friends honor persons who are very successful in accumulating wealth by any means. The foolish devotee of the Lord is thus put into forcible penance by the grace of the Lord, and at the end the devotee becomes perfectly happy, being engaged in the service of the Lord. Therefore, penance and devotional service of the Lord, either by voluntary submission or by being forced by the Lord, is necessary for attaining perfection. And thus such penance is the internal potency of the Lord. One cannot, however, be engaged in the penance of devotional service without being completely free from all sins. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, only a person who is completely free from all reactions of sins can engage himself in the worship of the Lord. Brahmaji was sinless, and therefore he faithfully discharged the advice of the Lord, tapa, tapa, and the Lord, being satisfied with him, awarded him the desired result. Therefore only love and penance combined can please the Lord, and thus one is able to attain His complete mercy. He directs the sinless, and the sinless devotee attains the highest perfection of life. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Hare Krishna. I'd like to request the blessings of the senior Vaishnavas so I can try to speak on this nice verse and be of some service to the community of devotees and explaining the message of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And I offer my respects again and again to Srila Prabhupada for offering us the Srimad Bhagavatam to discuss and to give us knowledge of the absolute truth. So we're hearing, continuing to hear the message of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and we're hearing this nice purport about penance and austerities. Does everybody here know a little bit about penances and austerities for the devotional service of the Lord? It's a I think we all are feeling it a bit if we're serving New Govardhan. There's a bit of a fire happening, and it's if you join in on it, you get the mercy. Sometimes it feels like you're frying in a big pot of hot ghee. So much service to do to keep everything going. And this is a perfect verse for us to understand and give us inspiration why we should stay in the hot ghee as much as possible. This is the penance of devotional service that's being spoken about. And in order to be purified of our materialistic tendencies, we have to undergo the penance of devotional service. So this is being exhibited by Lord Brahma, who is this is a very important, I see this as the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, at least the beginning of the message of the Srimad Bhagavatam in and of itself. And leading up to speaking about Lord Brahma, I see as kind of introductory principles and concepts. But hearing about Lord Brahma and the creation of the universe is like the beginning of the message of the Bhagavatam. So Lord Brahma is the first living entity in the universe, and he basically just wakes up, and he's the only one in the whole universe, and he doesn't know what to do. He searches for any clues of what is to be done. Could you imagine being the only one, and you just wake up and you're on some lotus flower and there's just darkness all around, and you don't know what is to be done. So that was Lord Brahma's situation. And then he heard the sounds tapa from a celestial voice in the sky, and somehow he understood what that meant, probably due to his previous qualifications. He understood that it meant that he should undergo this penance, and he started meditating for thousands of years. He meditated, and then the Supreme Lord revealed himself. So Lord Brahma is the head of our sampradaya, and the Srimad Bhagavatam is the message of our sampradaya. It's the direct revelation coming down. So Lord Brahma is the first link, and this description is the first revelation of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord directly revealed himself to Lord Brahma in the beginning of the universe, and he's the first link to Krishna himself. And that's the message. That's why in 10 verses we're hearing about the Chatur Shloki Bhagavatam, which is the 4 original seed verses of the Bhagavatam. And then the Bhagavatam is not like the Shruti, that it stays the exact same every time it's transmitted. It's a Purana, and it's a Smriti, so it's a story, it's a message that's being handed down. And so the message was revealed to Brahma from within his heart by the Supreme Lord, and then he gave that to Narada Muni to Vyasadeva, Vyasadeva to Shukadev Goswami to Maharaj Parikshit and Sutta Goswami to the sages of Naimishranya, etc. So the message of the Bhagavatam gets handed down. And what is that message? That message is the message of Bhagavan, of the Supreme Lord. So that's the Bhagavatam is the message of Bhagavan, the Supreme Lord. And so that's what we're hearing about here, is the first revelation of Bhagavan in the universe to Lord Brahma. And we're also in the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. So hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam is essential for understanding our lineage and the process of Krishna consciousness in a very detailed way. So that's where we're at in the Bhagavatam here, and the concept that's being spoken about is this penance and undergoing difficulties. So like I said before, I think we all can relate to this concept of going through challenges, and I just wanted to speak a little bit about that from my own experience when I was my first 4 years in Krishna consciousness. I was living in the Chicago temple as a brahmachari, and it was a bit more austere than New Govardhan in certain ways. Chicago was a quite dangerous city, and the temple was quite old, and it's also quite cold in Chicago. So we stayed, all the brahmacharis stayed in a big room together, and the windows, there was always cold air coming through in the winter times, coming through the windows, and we were sleeping on the floor in sleeping bags with cold air coming in these big rooms. And also, I was from a small town, and so being in the city of Chicago for the living there, I was actually quite scared at night. I thought maybe a bullet was going to come through the walls, and sometimes there was gun shooting you could hear every once in a while in the neighborhood. And past 8 or 9 o'clock, there was nothing but drug dealers and prostitution going on just right outside the temple, right outside the door. And this was a penance for me to live in this Chicago temple. And the temple room itself was extremely beautiful, though. So every morning, the temple is about maybe 3 or 4 times bigger than this temple. And it's a beautiful room with a chandelier in the middle and big pictures of Prabhupada and Krishna all over. And the altar of Kishore Kishori, it starts at about 3 feet high. It's like a big stage, and the deities are up on this big stage. And so the temple room was like a rocket ship in the middle of hell. That's what it was like. And I would wake up every morning and go to Mangalarti and just and chant my rounds there, and I would sit for the full 2 hours of japa every day. Even as a new devotee, that was the standard. We would all sit in the temple room and chant for the whole 2 hours, and that was the penance and austerities that I was going through for the first 4 years. I would just sit in one place and chant my japa in this hellish city, but somehow we were in this transcendental little bubble in the temple of Krishna. And so sometimes in the winter I wouldn't go outside for a couple weeks at a time. I'd stay inside inside the building. And so this penance is the purifying process of Krishna consciousness, undergoing these challenges. But Krishna consciousness is never dry. There's other examples of penances in the Bhagavatam that you can do different penances for different reasons. Penances in the mode of ignorance. There's some Christians, they go around like hitting themselves on the back. What's it called, Yadu? Do you know?
Self-flagellation.
Yeah, self-flagellation. Yeah. So we don't have to do that. We don't have to hit ourselves on the back. That's called, in the Bhagavad Gita, it's called penance in the mode of ignorance. But we do have to do some penance. We do have to undergo some austerities to burn away our material conditioning. And that's the process of Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada summarizes it really well in the end of the chapter, and the purport. He says, "Only love and penance combined can please the Lord." And speaking of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he underwent some serious penances before he started his preaching mission, because it was his appearance day yesterday. I was thinking of him. He chanted how many rounds every day? 192 rounds. every day for how long? About 9 years or something. He made a vow, 192 rounds every day. And this was his vow of penance before he started his preaching mission. So that's a good example of one of our acharyas who also underwent some serious penances before engaging even in his mission. He underwent those penances. And so there's examples in the Bhagavatam of penance, similar penances, like Hiranyakashipu. Hiranyakashipu, he underwent some penances. Does anybody know what he did? Hiranyakashipu? He stood up with his arms in the air for thousands of celestial years, and he was trying to get the blessings of Lord Brahma to become immortal. So this is penance in the mode of passion, trying to achieve some material result. You can engage in austerities. So it's not just by penance alone that we can achieve the Supreme Lord. There has to be the right conception why we're doing it. So you can't just keep pushing, keep working without the right conception. You have to have the right conception of why you're doing it, and you have to have this love. That's Prabhupada saying, only love and penance combined can please the Lord. There's a pastime, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, where there's a brahmachari who wants the association of Lord Chaitanya, and the devotees say he's very austere. He only drinks milk. That's all he does. And Lord Chaitanya was furious. He said, "You think that only by performing this little penance you can achieve me? No way." He showed in this example that it's not just about the penance itself. It's about the penance and the love, and the mood behind it. So why do we engage in penance in the first place? This is the background information. Why should we engage in penance, in devotional service in the first place? I mentioned it a couple of times already. The concept is to purify ourselves of the material contamination. So this, giving the whole concept of Krishna consciousness, the whole worldview of Krishna consciousness, the Sambandha Gyan, understanding what's going on. The main principles are that we are fallen, that we have fallen into the material world. When Sanatana Goswami approached Lord Chaitanya, he asked him two questions. He said, "Who am I, and why am I suffering the threefold miseries of material existence?" And then Lord Chaitanya went on to explain very seriously Sambandha Gyan to Sanatana Goswami, and Sanatana Goswami then became the Acharya of Sambandha Gyan. And then one of the main books I've found that helped me understand Sambandha Gyan the most is Sanatana Goswami's Srimad Bhagavatam. So because Sanatana Goswami was fully inspired or empowered by Lord Chaitanya to understand Sambandha Gyan, he gave it in such a nice way through understanding by understanding the Brihad Bhagavatamrita. It's a story that goes through the whole material universe into the spiritual universe, and it's such a nice read that it very, very clearly gives a glimpse of the spiritual potencies, the material potencies, the living entity that is in between. So that's what Lord Chaitanya spoke about when Sanatana Goswami asked him, first, who am I, and why am I suffering the threefold miseries? He said, Lord Chaitanya said, Krishna Kirtan? Jivera Swarupa Hoy, Krishna Nityadas. He said, who are you? He said, you're an eternal servant of Krishna. He said, but he goes on to explain that the jiva comes under the control of the inferior potency of the Supreme Lord. And Lord Chaitanya quotes some famous verses from the Vishnu Purana explaining this situation. This is the foundation of Sambandha Gyan, that the Lord, there's the Supreme Lord, and he has three potencies: spiritual potency, material potency, and then the living entity who's in between, or the internal potency, the tatashta potency, and the bahiranga potency. Internal, external, and the in-between. So this is the Sambandha Gyan, understanding that we are the living entities and we're caught in the material world. But we actually belong to the superior potency, the spiritual potency. That's our nature. Jivera Swarupuhoy Krishna Nityadas. We belong to the spiritual potency, the spiritual world, but somehow or other we are in the material world, somehow or other. And the way to get out of the material world is by engaging in divine austerities. That's what Rishabdev Maharaj explains in the 5th canto, that the human form of life is meant to be used for divine austerities and not sensual activity. Prabhupada uses the term sense gratification. How many times have we heard that term, sense gratification? Yeah. What does it mean exactly? I like to break it down a bit more, because it's not a common term to use. When sometimes devotees say it, throw it around as if it's like a very easy thing to understand. It's just sense gratification. I met this devotee from England. He called it sense grat. He shortened it. I just needed some sense grat. And but what is a sense gratification? I like to call it more like self-centered sensual pleasure. That's a bit easier to understand, right? Self-centered sensual pleasure. Trying to get sensual enjoyment, and that enjoyment is based around a selfish motive. That's sense gratification. Even Amrita Swami talks about this a lot. He always smashes the material world a lot. He talks about how the happiness that comes from sense gratification is no different from that the animals can get. And Rishabdev says it very, very heavily as well, that when the humans are engaging in selfish sensual activities, they're engaging on the animal platform. They're like acting like hogs, dogs, camels, and asses. That's what he says. But he said the human life is not meant for this sensual activity. The human life is meant for tapo divyam, divine austerities. And that's what New Govardhana is all about. Tapo divyam, engaging in the fire of the penance of devotional service. By coming here and engaging in service and submitting ourselves to the project of New Govardhana and the mission of Srila Prabhupada, the mission of Lord Chaitanya. Although it's very difficult, it's very challenging, we get pushed to the limits. This is the divine austerities that purifies us, the living entities who are covered over by the material energy. We engage in this divine service, this divine austerities, and we become purified of our material contamination, and then we regain our spiritual nature. We regain our spiritual nature, and we get to go to the spiritual realm, which is the ultimate positive. This is what we have to keep, the prayojana, the goal. Keep the goal in mind, the happiness. Keep the happiness in mind. What's to come is pure, eternal, spiritual happiness. That's what we're working towards. And so, when we're engaging in the challenges and pushing ourselves for the service, we always have to keep in mind what we're working towards. The happiness, the love for Krishna is what we're working towards. We're working towards the spiritual world, regaining our spiritual identity, and the Bhagavatam goes on to explain that in great detail, what the spiritual world is like, what type of activities are there, what we will be doing. Lord Brahma himself explains it. he just explained it actually in this chapter, although I haven't been attending the class much, but he did explain it as we've been hearing. The Vaikuntha world, the devotees are always in pure states of ecstasy, always engaged in the worship and service of the Supreme Lord. They're very beautiful, they're eternal, they're flying around in airplanes, they're always glorifying the Lord. It's a celestial, beautiful, perfect place. This is the Satya Param, the supreme reality is the spiritual world. That's the actual reality, is the spiritual world, and we're caught in the inferior reality. And so by engaging in divine austerities, we make our way back to that realm. And Lord Brahma explains also that in the Brahma Samhita, he goes on to explain the nature of Goloka Vrindavan in great detail, that how sweet and how beautiful everything is in Goloka Vrindavan. And but how do we get there? These are the practical steps: engaging in the austerities of devotional service, becoming purified, and making our way gradually, step by step, back to Godhead, back to the spiritual world. And we can't be too extreme. That's sometimes when we're new, we get really extreme. There's a tendency, sense gratification, nope, nothing, family, brahmachari for life, going back to Godhead. Everything else, forget about it. But it's not so easy. So the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam explains, and also Lord Chaitanya himself, although he's very heavy and very serious when he talks to those who are qualified to be renunciates, he's very heavy, but he's also very encouraging and very supportive of, and he gives the practical steps to those who are not ready for renunciation, who are not on that platform. So if we're not able to live under a tree every single day and chant 192 rounds every day and sleep for 2 hours, and like even Srila Prabhupada was on this level, sleeping only a few hours and engaging fully in devotional service without any material needs. If we're on that platform, then we're good to go. But if we're not, we need some practical guidance how to get there. And Lord Chaitanya, who spoke to our Prayojana Acharya, Raghunath Das Goswami, who was on that level, but Lord Chaitanya instructed him for our benefit. When he was trying to renounce his family and give up everything, he was like, had enough of his opulence and just wanted to go serve Lord Chaitanya directly. Lord Chaitanya said, don't be a crazy fellow. Don't just give up everything. You go back and be a normal person. Be a normal person, but always think of me and engage in devotional service. And that's Raghunath Das Goswami, who at that time was living with his family. But later on, Lord Chaitanya told him, eventually you'll get the mercy, and then you'll be able to renounce everything. So this is a very instructive pastime of Lord Chaitanya, that we should be normal people. We should meet our needs, our basic needs, but we should engage in the process of devotional service and wait for the mercy. The mercy will come in time. So, and then when the time comes, with patience and enthusiasm, like Rupa Goswami says, then we will naturally be qualified to give up everything, and it'll be easy and natural to chant 192 rounds and live under a tree in Vrindavan and hear and chant all day. But until then, we should be regulated and engage in the process of devotional service in a regulated fashion and wait for the mercy. And I think that's about all that I have for today. And if there's any questions or comments, reflections, I spoke about the Bhagavatam, the message of the Bhagavatam and Lord Brahma's austerities. I explained how we're also going through austerities, and I explained why we're going through austerities, because we're in the material world, have to get back to the spiritual world, and how to practically get there through regulated devotional service. Do you have any comments to add from the devotees? I've kind of run out of time, but Prabhupada gave short classes too, so don't always have to talk for an hour. Vaishnavi?
I just quickly looked up self-flagellation and it says extreme criticism of oneself. So you mentioned about Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and it's also said that he mentioned that we should beat our mind with a stick and shoes. So can you explain those two?
How they contradict each other?
Like the spiritual perspective and then the material self.
Well, I think the pastime that I told about Raghunatha Goswami fits that. What type of austerities are you qualified to perform, and what is beneficial? If you try to be too hard on yourself and you're not qualified for that level of austerities, then you end up falling down. It's too difficult. And so you always have to know where you're at and what you can handle, and then do little bits at a time. If you're too hard on yourself, too unrealistically hard on yourself, like, oh, I need to be a pure devotee tomorrow, I can't have any material things, material desires or anything, then it becomes so hard every day just to walk into the temple. You feel so bad about yourself. It's like so challenging. But if you say, no, this is where I'm at, this is where I want to be, and how do I get there practically? So it's very important. It's very important to have a balanced perspective of yourself, where you're at and where you want to be.
Devotees compare or look at that person and that. So there's a healthy, spiritual perspective. We see that we look up to someone and we aspire to follow in their footsteps. Whereas trying to compare sometimes it may be like trying to imitate, but as you say, we're not really ready for it, or we haven't gone through the stages or the foundation. The foundation is not built, and then you want to jump. It's like the Prabhupada gives that example of big monkey.
What is that example?
The big monkey. Big belly.
Very melancholy. So that means let us this example Prabhupada gives from Raman, after they're getting over the Raman, so this monkey become proud, they're jumping and everything. But also don't be proud too much of the small austerity. Just be always humble.
Okay. Do you have anything else, or is that? Yeah. Okay. Vishnu Jan, Krishna Kirtan.
Just quickly, what is actually what is actual austerity that goes before? Sometimes you hear Shilpata being quoted as what is a difficulty, simply chanting, dancing, and feasting. So what is the austerity? The austerity trying to maintain dual connection while we're trying to be spiritual at the same time. So is that the struggle? Is that the austerity? Because spiritual life is not very austere.
I think the austerity is heard it said following the 4 regulative principles and chanting our 16 rounds and waking up and going to Mangalarti. Maybe you forgot about the austerities because you're so transcendental.
That is because we're conditioned somewhere under the mode of 3 modes of material nature, right? Like that's what makes it mysterious.
You're saying that it's austere because we're conditioned?
Yeah.
Yeah. Waking up early is not easy for me. It's a challenge.
Can I ask one more question because about the penance thing? Like you were saying, like the Christians, they hit themselves on the back, right?
Yeah.
And that's like that would be in the mode of ignorance, but somebody could argue like, well, it's for God, so what makes it then the mode of ignorance? Obviously, it's self-harm.
Well, the Bhagavad Gita says explicitly that how does it say? Something about harming your body is in the mode of ignorance. Yeah. I forgot exactly the words. Yeah. Well, I guess it could, there are some, it has to be authorized austerities, basically. That's what it says in the previous verse. It says, severe penance, Lord Krishna was happy with Brahma because he performed penances according to my order. So, if we are acting according to the order of the Supreme Lord gave a specific injunction, and then you do maybe get some difficulties on your body because of it. Some things like, Arjuna on the battlefield, putting his body at risk. That same thing can happen. We can put our health at risk by serving so much. Over time, it happens. When you're younger, not so much. But then, if you keep pushing, you're putting your body at risk. But if you're following according to the injunctions, then Krishna will be pleased. Yeah.
But how would you find that balance then? Because if you're overdoing, because Prabhupada also spoke about health first. Where do you find the balance? Where you're pushing it too much?
Oh yeah, you have to keep that in mind. Yeah. But there's no loss if you are engaged in a specific service. There's glorious devotees who have put their health at risk for the Sankirtan movement, and what is the loss? They live the full life of devotional service, and that's a Bhagavatam quote too. That there's no. What is the loss if you give up everything and engage in the process of devotional service? There's no loss, but yeah, there are instructions to be regulated and keep your body healthy, long-term service. Yeah.
Thank you.
Self-torture.
Self-torture. What's that?
Mode of ignorance, austere.
Self-torture. Okay, that's what the Bhagavad Gita says. This mode of ignorance, self-torture. Pretty explicit with the flagellation.
I was remembering Devotional Swami because recently, not too long ago, he gave a Zoom class in Melbourne, and he mentioned about how...
The microphone's not on.
Devotional Swami gave a Zoom class not too long ago in Melbourne, and he mentioned about, devotee was asking about spiritual bypassing, and Devotional Swami said that, and it's also written in scriptures that practicing devotional service is not dependent on anything material, and then sometimes devotees may have marital problems or heart problems and things like that. So Maharaj mentioned that yes, the process of devotional service is transcendental and very powerful, but are we like that? How are we practicing? How are we chanting our vows? So we have to approach it very carefully, and because sometimes devotees need something else, so we can practice devotional life in a healthy way. But we have to see the quality of our practice, because Krishna carries what we have, and he protects what we have, and he carries what we lack. So it's also a matter of a little introspection someone about our own progress and our difficulties.
Thank you for sharing. Okay, anything else, Chandrika? All right.
I'm just wondering, what happens when you're in that boiling hot ghee? You've all been there, right?
Yeah.
And you're having a meltdown.
What happens?
Yeah? When you're having a meltdown in the boiling hot ghee.
You're asking me what happens or what should we do?
But,
Or yeah.
Because it does happen.
Yeah.
I know it's happening.
Yeah, well, it's sometimes it's necessary to take a break, and if we're not able to maintain our standard, we need a vacation. Take a bit of a vacation, be a bit regulated, and take a break if we need. That can help us go for the long term. Maybe go to Coolangatta, go for a swim, and.
You can also talk to the other pakoras and see how they're going.
Pakoras?
No, you can talk to the other pakoras.
Oh, the other pakoras who are burning in the ghee. Yeah, it does happen. We get overburnt, but that's the whole concept, that we should try to organize our devotional life in a way that we don't get too burnt and we know what we can handle, and so we have a long-term vision for our devotional life. So before we get burnt out, we should take the steps that we know how to live a life that we can maintain throughout our devotional lives. Thank you for the question. All right, thank you. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari.